LSU doling out offers left and right, including to the number one player in the country for 2026. We'll tell you about him. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you for that. The dead period is over for recruiting, which means the LSU staff is out pounding the pavements, visiting recruits, and my goodness, have they been busy doling out offers to players all over the country for the class of 2026, including the number one player in the country, Zion Elee, a defensive end from Maryland. I'll get to that in just a second, but highly encourage you. Go check out my guy, Jarrett Roser of On3, his Twitter. He's doing nothing but retweeting players from all over the country who've got their LSU offers. Boom, boom, boom. There's Corey Wells, photographed with Bo Davis, class of 2026, 6'5", 290-pound defensive lineman, got his offer from LSU. There's Keyshawn Stansel, a 2026, 6'3", 260-pound defensive lineman, got his offer from LSU. Frederick Ards, a 2027, 6'5", 225-pound defensive end outside linebacker, got his offer from LSU. I could go on and on. CJ Bronob, a defensive back, 6'1", 170 for the class of 2026, got his LSU offer. Xavion Griffin-Haynes, a 5-star, 6'6", 235-pound edge, has his LSU offer. JUCO offensive tackle Jermaine Mitchell got his LSU offer. We can go on and on. 4-star offensive tackle Zayden Krempin has his LSU offer. Pictured there with Brad Davis. You get the point. Dead period is over. LSU staff out on the road, pounding the pavement, recruiting, and doling out offers to players for 2026 left and right. They use this time to recruit, to evaluate, to organize their board for 2026. And now it's time to go meet those players, dole out those offers, and see who you can get in with. But it was interesting because they hand out an offer to Zion Elee, E-L-E-E, Zion Elee, who is the number one player in the country, according to On3, for 2026. Now, remember, the number one player in the country for 2026 was Jakeem Stewart out of New Orleans. But Jakeem Stewart reclassified for the class of 2025 and ultimately signed with USC. So now the number one player for 2026, according to On3, is Zion Elee, a defensive end edge from St. Francis Academy in Maryland in the Baltimore area. Now, depending on which scouting service you subscribe to, will tell you, which what his ranking is. But On3 has him as the number one player in the country. In the composite, Zion Elee is the number 3 overall player in the country, but he is the consensus number 1 defensive end edge player in the country. The only reason his rating is lower than number 1 is because Rivals has him as the 22nd best player in the country. Whatever. Bottom line is, it doesn't matter what you subscribe to. Dude's good, okay? You're talking about a massive edge rusher for the class of 2026 who's 6'3", 220, and someone that has offers from everybody. Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon. But what's interesting is that Tennessee, he's already committed to Maryland. Remember, I told you he's from Baltimore, and he's committed to the Terrapins, to the Terps. But even though he committed in December to Maryland, he's still taking visits. He's got a visit scheduled coming up to Auburn. And LSU certainly would love to get Zion Elee on campus sooner than later. But there's a couple of things about this that I think are interesting that could actually get LSU involved. So I mentioned that he's from Baltimore. Let me first start with the commitment to Maryland. And then I'll tell you about LSU's commitment to Baltimore. Zion Elee committing to Maryland feels a lot like when Jamar Chase committed to Kansas. And I don't mean this to be disparaging. And listen, I mean, like Maryland is an Under Armour school. The Under Armour founder is a Maryland alum, and they've got certainly resources there. But, you know, when Jamar Chase was this elite receiver coming out of New Orleans, he and some other guys took a visit to Kansas in Lawrence because there were guys from Louisiana, LSU guys on staff at Kansas that got him in the mix, and he was there, and he got caught up in it and committed. And he was never going to Kansas. He ultimately later flipped to Florida and then landed at LSU, and that's how it was supposed to be. But this kind of feels like that. Now, in an NIL world, maybe, just maybe, Maryland, with their Under Armour money, can keep Zion Elee in the boat. We'll see. But it's not like LSU going up to Maryland, and in particular, St. Francis Academy is a stretch to think they could land Zion Elee. Let me tell you what I mean. So St. Francis Academy, if you're not in Baltimore, if you're not familiar, is one of these football factory schools. In particular, over the last 15 or 20 years, they have really just churned out elite level players. And here of late, LSU has gone to Baltimore, and in particular, St. Francis Academy, gotten players. 2 years ago, Deshaun Womack was a 5-star edge out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore who signed with LSU. Prior to that, Jordan Tolles, a safety from St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, signed with LSU. Greg Penn, wearer of the 18 jersey. Now, he was not at St. Francis, but he was at DeMatha Catholic out of Baltimore, signed with LSU, came here, became a starter, wore the 18 jersey, all that stuff. The point is, here of late, LSU not only has gone and recruited kids from Baltimore, but they have gotten commitments and signees from Baltimore. Now, Womack and Tolles have both transferred out, and that's what it is. It's the culture in the day and age. But when you have inroads at a school and you've gone and recruited that school and you know those coaches, it's a benefit. Now, Brian Kelly, for what it's worth, when he was at, this is an interesting stat that I looked up. No St. Francis Academy player has ever signed with Notre Dame. Ever. Like in the history of the school. But since 2019, remember, Kelly was there in 19, 20, 21 before coming to LSU in 22. And in 2 of those seasons, he had Marcus Freeman as his defensive coordinator. But starting back in 2019, since 2019 to now, Notre Dame has offered 10 St. Francis Academy players. So the point is, LSU has gotten kids out of St. Francis Academy, LSU's gotten kids out of Baltimore, and Brian Kelly and his staff at Notre Dame had been recruiting Baltimore as well, in particular St. Francis Academy. So there's a relationship there. There's actually a really good piece at one of the Notre Dame fan sites about Notre Dame recruiting, like prioritizing St. Francis, a Catholic school in Baltimore, and trying to get more inroads there. If you want to read it, it's interesting. But in any event, the point is, Zion Elee is the number 1 player in the country. He's an edge, and he's from Baltimore, but he's already shown a willingness to extend beyond, including taking visits to SEC schools. You have certainly proven you have NIL budget to spend, and you have success going into Baltimore and getting players from not only Baltimore, but that school to LSU. Oh, LSU can get in the mix. And there's one more reason why Zion Elee might consider LSU, and I'll tell you what that is as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with the other fans, it's unmatched. I remember, and I've shared these stories before, the thrill of watching the Saints from the 2006 divisional round game against the Eagles, the 2006 NFC Championship game in Chicago. I was there, unfortunately, all the way to 2009, watching the Saints in the playoffs in the divisional round against Arizona, all the way through the Super Bowl. The bottom line is, unfortunately, I was at the Nola no-call game as well in 2018 against the Rams. But the bottom line is, The NFL playoffs provides memories you'll never forget. And this year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff. It shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, which is being there. Use Game Time Picks for an upcoming playoff game. It could not be easier. You can find the super deal, which will give you incredible value on amazing seats. You can preview the seat from the spot before you buy, the all-in pricing. I've told you about this so much. It's a game changer. I hate when I go to one of these apps. You think you're paying a certain price. You get to checkout and boom, here's a ton of fees and it's double the price. Not with Game Time Picks. It'll show you the all-in price up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. That's with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So I mentioned all the reasons why Zion Elee could lean toward LSU. There's one more. On top of LSU's inroads, not only into Baltimore, but into St. Francis, the NIL budget. On top of that, playing time. Look at LSU's pass rushers from last year to this year to what you're looking for in 2026. The 2024 season, boy, you had two really veteran players, in Savion Jones and Braden Swinson. They played well. Both, however, are off to the NFL draft. So when you look at 2025, LSU went ham in the portal looking at edge rushers. And you signed the best one in the portal, and Patrick Payton from Florida State, a guy who's got 16 and a half career sacks and more than 30 career TFLs. You added Jamari Butler from Nebraska, who's entering his sixth year, a super senior taking advantage of the COVID year. Jack Pyburn from Florida. He never redshirted. He played his first 3 years with the Gators. He is a very good run-stuffing edge that wants to become an elite pass rusher. In fact, Jack told me on my radio show, that he is an effective pass rusher. He wants to become an elite pass rusher. His words. We played it for you here. But you got those three guys. Unfortunately, all three have 1 year of eligibility left. So they're all gone after 2025. So when you look at 2026, Gabe Relaford will be in his third season. Kalaj Cobbins will be in his third season in Baton Rouge, but as a redshirt sophomore. Dylan Carpenter will be in his third season at LSU. Again, Cobbins and Carpenter, guys that were seldom used in their freshman seasons and may not get a ton of playing time behind the veterans you brought in via the portal. And then there's Damian Shanklin, the number one player in the state of Indiana, who's coming in. He was here for the bowl practices as well, but he'll be in his second season. The point is, you are super thin on numbers and experience. So if you can bring in a guy like Zion Elee, he may not step on campus day one as a true freshman and be a starter for you who gives you 60 defensive snaps a game. But that's a guy who, 18 months from now could step on the field for you day one in 2026 when Clemson opens the season in Baton Rouge, not in 2026, and be a guy that's contributing for you because you're going to have a giant need. So you've got the inroads into that school. You've got the NIL budget. You've got a willing player willing to look around. And my goodness, do you have playing time available as well? There's a lot of reasons to think that the number one player in the country, Zion Elee, for 2026 could very well have eyes towards LSU. And when you look at what that 2026 class is already looking like, remember, LSU in 2025, the 2025 class, the high school class they just polished off, it was at one point the number one class in the country where you had Bryce Underwood, you had the number one quarterback, receiver, and running back and cornerback in the country. Well, Underwood, of course, as we know what happened, defected there. The number one receiver in the country ends up at Oregon, but you end up getting the number one running back in the country and the number one cornerback in the country, and Harlem Berry and DJ Pickett to end up in Baton Rouge. When you start to look toward 2026, though, and what that 2026 class can look like, we've talked about the bumper crop in Louisiana, where you have a handful of players in the top 75 nationally, right? All from the state of Louisiana. You've already got some top players in the state committed. Richard Anderson, who's number 34 nationally. Aiden Hall, number 38 nationally. Jerylan McCoy, he's out of Tupelo, number 124 nationally. Kenny Darby from Bossier City, number 235 nationally. Ja'Kai Anderson and Jalen Chapman, a couple of other New Orleans area kids who are already committed for the class of 2026. The bottom line is, when you start looking at 2026 and what is there in this state of Louisiana, if you end up keeping the best players in the state home, you are looking at Lamar Brown from U High, the number 11 player in the country. Blaine Bradford from Catholic, the number 15 player in the country. You've already got Richard Anderson committed. You've got Aiden Hall committed. Bryson Martinez, offensive lineman from East Ascension, number 52 nationally. Jabari Mack from Destrehan, number 78 nationally. That's 6 players in the top 78 in the country, all within an hour of LSU's campus. This is one of those things that we talked about. That's the kind of class, the bumper crop in this state that sometimes about every decade or so they produce at that level. We could talk about the 2001 class with Michael Clayton and Marcus Spears and Marquise Hill and Andrew Whitworth. That ended up netting you a national championship in 2003. We could talk about the FAM in 2011, which was Jarvis and Odell and Freak Johnson. That great class, Lyle Collins, that class played for a national championship in 2011. And then you could look at this bumper crop in Louisiana right now that could very well get you back into that conversation in 2027, 2028. I know that's a long way to think about it. It's a long ways off. But the core teams, the core of LSU's championship teams, we could even look at 2019. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Rashard Lawrence. Look at the key players on that team. Grant Delpit was a kid from Houston, but from New Orleans who ended up defecting because of Katrina. Derek Stingley from Baton Rouge. Christian Fulton from New Orleans. Look, I mean, that was a team built around Louisiana kids. When you get the best in this state, especially in years like that to stay home, you have the makings of a championship team. Another thing that LSU can sell, the best players in the country for 2026, including Zion Elee, the number 1 player in the country for 2026. The Tigers are in the mix there. We'll certainly keep you posted. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this episode of Locked On LSU. Please do us a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, if you're listening on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.